All right, and with that, we are alive. How you doing today, Jason? Good to see you.
I think I'm awake.
Wake is good. And hello to everybody out there on YouTube. Let us know how our volume levels are. So if you guys can chime in and tell us if our levels are good or if they need to come up or if they need to come down so we can make that adjustment before we get too far into the stream. We'll give it a second for everybody to get that going. Let me check on the stream here. Looks good. Yeah, everything's looking good. So, all right, cool. How's the weather today in SoCal? Warm, cold?
Yeah, it's about right now. I think it's about 68 degrees. Sun's out, a couple clouds.
That's perfect.
Not too bad.
No,
You could
yep.
actually almost go surfing today.
It's perfect for the wintertime too. I still have snow everywhere around my house. I can't wait for spring already. All right, let's Okay, cool. That looks good. Awesome. So whenever you guys catch this and you're up to speed in the live chat, let us know how our volume levels are. All right, cool. So, Jason, for those that don't know you, let's talk a little bit about like who you are as a person outside of work. Like, what do you do for fun? What are your hobbies? What do you spend your free time doing when you're not working? You work a lot, but when you're not working, what do you do for fun?
So I think my biggest joys are things like, I'm a big racing fan, so I like to, and I have some Shelby cars, and I like to get inside of them, make noise, and go around the track a few times, burn some rubber, burn some fuel, make the brakes hot.
Yeah,
That kind of stuff is always fun. I've been a bass player or a musician actually since I was six, so uh, I'm I'm mostly into playing bass, and so I do a lot of things that involve playing music and playing bass. Those
very
kind of
cool.
things are fun. I do I during the warmer weather I surf every day before I come to work. In the colder times like now, I sometimes I brave it, two or three times a week, and so those are the kinds of things I do.
That's cool. Awesome. Yeah, I never got into surfing, but I tried it a couple times and I did enjoy it. I didn't do it enough to get good at it, but it's a pretty rewarding experience for once you start to really get the hang of it too. At least that's what my friends tell me. I have a couple buddies that live in San Diego and they go constantly. So cool. All right. So for those of you who don't know who Jason is the co-founder of TSAV, and he's got a rich background that we're going to talk about today, and then we're going to kind of get into just having fun and talking about music and test tracks and gear, and we'll take questions from you guys in the chat as well. So with that, Jason, can you think about in your life, you've had some rich, awesome experiences throughout your life around music, being a musician and working in the industry. Can you think of the first moment you had a really, truly shocking hi-fi experience where you heard, an incredible system, or maybe it was a live show or whatever, and it just really struck you and just kind of hooked you from that point?
So, in terms of hi-fi systems,
Just like a high fidelity listening experience, just something that blew you away when you heard it. You were like, wow, and it stuck with you.
it's when I first when I first got into hi-fi, it was kind of by accident. It was I was in the military, and I was sort of already into hi-fi, but the I was in the military, and I went into a PX, which enabled me to buy this really kind of interesting Sansui receiver that was probably close to 100 pounds, and it was just massive, and a pair of Sansui speakers. And I think that the entire thing cost me about $300.
Nice.
Uh, and I was just so I had that shipped back from overseas, and then I got home and I listened to it, and it was loud. Uh, it was fun looking. It had all kinds of lights on it. It was an interesting thing. But I started to, I went into, I'm from the area, Manhattan Beach, Redondo Beach, California, and I happened to be up in Santa Monica one day, and I ran into a guy named Jonas Miller. Uh, and that was the name of his store as well. And he was a very kind individual, liked to share his knowledge and sort of teach you about hi-fi, and then give you information about the hi-fi gear. And so he was sort of a mentor for a while, kind of like Carroll Shelby when I was I think I was 15, allowed me to go through his racing school, and so that's how I got into cars. It was always somebody that of influence in the industry. Jonas Miller, of course, is the Miller of M&K, if you remember M&K speakers, and
Right.
so that was he was just a good guy, and the aha moment was when he played um, it was one of the Macintosh systems with a speaker um, made by Quad at the time. So it was an electrostatic speaker. I remember the decadent thing about it was as we went to, I think, his house, if I remember right, where we listened to the Quads and the Macintosh. And the big thing at that point was smoking cigars and drinking exotic wines. And so I'm not sure if it was an aha moment because I got drunk or if it was an aha moment because it was a very good sounding system. But I remember it was that was my aha moment where I decided that I wanted to learn more about that aspect of electronics because I was already into electronics big time. And it wasn't necessarily audio from the standpoint of hi-fi. Uh, it was electronics in general, but that's kind of, I think that's my aha moment initially for hi-fi.
Very cool. And hey, Tyler, what's up? Cheers. How's it going? He says, and what's up, Jason? And he thanks you for your service. Tyler also served, so a fellow veteran.
Ah,
Good to see you,
well, thank
Tyler.
you.
Um, that's very cool. Tyler, let us know how our audio levels are because we haven't had anybody pop in the chat to tell us if audio is good or bad. So let us know. I just want to make sure we don't want to get comments later that our audio was bad. So do you have a favorite band? I know you're big into jazz, like because you've gotten me into jazz, like quite a bit actually, comparatively from a little over a year ago when I started working with you. But tell me about, do you have another, is it a favorite jazz band or what is just one of your favorite bands that you constantly go back and find yourself listening to? And then other than jazz, what other genres do you really enjoy?
Favorites, huh? So in modern stuff, one of my favorites, I've already told you about is Snarky Puppy.
Yeah, definitely.
Very, very innovative. They are not inside the box. They are definitely outside the box, and they very creative group of guys, and they're all out of well, it started out of Austin, Texas, with a bunch of college students, and I admire everything they do, and great musicianship, and they kind of plug and play musicians from different, groups or whatever, and so that like they have Corey Wong that plays with them, and they have Mark Lettieri that plays with them, and all these great guys. They also trying to think of there's a couple other plugins that they do now and then. I mean, for bass players, they've worked with two bass players at one time. Where I saw them do the bass player of Snarky Puppy, and then they had Victor Wooten, who was a monster bass player, do a kind of a solo or kind of a harmonic thing, and it was
Right.
very cool. But from the old days, I come from a world of Iron Butterfly, Jimi Hendrix, BB King, Albert King, Freddie King. My first paying gig in music was as a result of a guitarist named Larry Carlton, who comes from the city of Torrance, and I went to school in the city of Torrance. And so he's my senior by a number of years, but he got me my first paying gig, and so he was probably my first uh, jazz guitarist that I really really appreciated. Um, but he also turned me on to Latin jazz that I hadn't heard. So Latin jazz is where I kind of fell into it really big, and probably the reason why I became a bassist instead of playing saxophone or something else. Um, but Latin jazz was just so rhythmic for me. It wasn't traditional 4/4 time. It was exploratory. It was fun. The girls were naughty. It was all good.
That's always a plus.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
So,
awesome.
so that's kind of where I go. Well, what would be? Well, I think Jesus, it's the Beatles, all that kind of stuff
Sure.
was okay. I was never a fan of the Stones, but they were a good vibe.
Yeah.
But all that kind of stuff was where I come from because, that's my initial influences come from the '60s, uh,
Right.
and so it's that's kind of where it started. Jimi Hendrix was probably one of my favorites from that time period, and but I'm all over the map in terms of music preferences. I like classical, I like jazz, I like rock. There are some things that I probably don't get into too much musically. A lot of people like hip hop and rap, and to me, it's kind of boring. It's rhythmic, and I like rhythmic stuff, but the content to me doesn't reach inside my soul, and
Sure.
so I'm not there. But from guys like you, the younger guys are teaching me about EDM and all these different other genres
Sure.
that I'm not generally exposed to that are enlightening, and some of it turns into pop, and it kind of makes me
Yeah.
want to pick my nose. But
Yep.
but it's and some of it is really really good. There's a lot of genius in music, and so I can appreciate everything from what younger people are appreciating today. I mean, I was never a guy that would get into stuff like ABBA. So
Right.
it was
Sure.
those are never my things. But that's not to say they weren't good music for somebody.
Right. Totally. Cool. Good. That was good. Okay, cool. So let's go into I have another question that I think is kind of cool, and I'll share some of mine too. And then Tyler, if you're still out there, you can share some of yours. Anybody else in the video chat, also drop in the comments what are some of your favorites. So let's talk a little bit about favorite test tracks that you like to play to get a feel for the sound. Let's say we get a new pair of headphones or speakers or amplifier, or, DAC or whatever it is, or table, whatever. What are some of your go-to test tracks that you really enjoy using to kind of hear the differences in those components or speakers or headphones?
So there's a number of different test tracks I use, but I'll kind of tell you how I come to those test tracks.
Sure.
I kind of look for test tracks that leave major holes in the music. So that might tell you why I turned you on to the song "Wingus"
Yeah.
by
Snarky
Snarky
puppy.
Puppy.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking for things that have space and layering and that can help me predict what a component is like. And I pick these now because for a number of years my brother and I have had the store, and what I'm trying to do with the music is discover how a component is working based on my knowledge of that particular material.
Right.
But I listen to Larry Carlton. I listen to Friends, the album specifically. There's a few tracks on the album Friends that are particularly good for listening to dynamics of a headphone. Tells me oftentimes if the mid range is over naturally wide, it's too wide, or and when that happens, typically if it's an over wide headphone in terms of the staging, you'll find there's a sacrifice in the frequency. A good example of that is the 800S, which is a very good headphone if you like that wide stage, but you sacrifice on the bass, it becomes a little bit anemic, but it's a pretty good headphone.
Way anemic on the bass, but yeah, the other stuff is like you said, it's pretty good. It's just really
Yeah,
light on the bass.
yeah.
Yep.
And then there's stuff like I use Toto, so because or Boz Scaggs.
Yeah.
There's a couple of tunes by Boz Scaggs that I kind of like. Um, there's a company called Sheffield that was out of the Santa Barbara area in California that made really good analog recordings. They were
Yep.
amazing at vinyl pressing. Uh, and they had test tracks that were just drop dead brilliant. I sometimes use some of those. One that's really, really good for space staging and to determine how wide and how warm a mid-range presentation can be is an album by a band called Flim and the BBs. And Flim and the BBs album that I would tell you maybe take a look at for component testing and image testing and layering testing and black space testing would be Bicycle. It's just got
Bicycle. Okay.
major holes in it. So you can hear things that maybe you've never really heard before because of how they do their recordings and the amount of space that they put into it. But there's a lot of great stuff. There's another one if I want to hear how big a voice can get. There's a black vocal group that was, I think they're referred to as the Fairfield Five.
Okay.
It's only four guys, but it's called the Fairfield Five. So I'm always going, is there somebody hidden under the table? Where is that guy?
The manager
like
or something.
Yeah, it's a that particular group. I mean, the voices, the way they record it, and the Neumann mic placement is just huge.
Yeah.
And it's gospel kind of music. I'm not particularly. I mean, I'm not a religious person, so I don't listen to it for that purpose. I listen to it for the quality of the recording.
Sure.
But I also reflect back on older recordings. So I might go and listen to an older track by Frank Sinatra just to hear, because some of that stuff, those older engineers, some of them were just amazing on how good they were, and the technology wasn't there. So so I think that if the newer recording technologies can bring that same space, that same size of the recording image into today's market, that would be kind of good. So if there's younger people trying to duplicate that, that would be awesome.
And I had a fun discovery actually. And you just reminded me of that. Those Sheffield, I'm almost 100% positive. Those Sheffield or some of those Sheffield recordings were placed. It's either on Qobuz or on Rune either Qobuz or on Tidal because I found them in Rune and I was playing around listening to some of those and they are brilliant actually. Oh, yeah. So yeah, they're really really good. Let's see what Tyler said. He says. He has audio ADHD and he listens to everything. Yeah, I'm kind of the same, except for country. No, not really a country guy. And then some of the test tracks he likes are Go-Go Penguin. Oh, Go-Go Penguin is very similar to Snarky Puppy in some ways. Yeah, kind of like a jazz. Yeah, like a jazz fusion. Goat by Polymorphia for speed. Billie Eilish, especially Billie Eilish for bass. You hear a lot if headphones are over bassed by hers. And what else? And anything from Blue Note. That's cool. That's rad, Tyler. Yeah, Tyler has a pretty diverse mix of music he listens to. In fact, we're constantly.
Well, he's right. Some of the Blue Note stuff is just brilliant. I mean, they've got Blue Note has got so many famous old jazz artists that are just amazing. And some of them, and I understand some of the more recent ones. Why are you all blurred out? You trying to do a Carrie Lake?
Oh, it lost me for a sec. Hold on. I don't know why it lost me. Let's see if it'll focus on this.
Not really.
Oh man, what happened? That's weird. Hold on. I'll put you to the main screen and I'll fix it. That's weird. Tell us a little bit about what you got behind you in that room while I'm fixing my camera. Tell us about the speakers in that system.
So these are the El Criminus, the Liliums by Sonus Faber. I think they're around $79,000 a pair. And then the electronics behind me. I don't know if you can see them. That's all audio research with an EAT turntable, and it's using a couple of mono blocks at 140 watts per. And that's the. I'm trying to think of what else is in there. So we have a tube driven audio research transport, CD transport in there. It's good stuff. I really like audio research. Is pretty good stuff. It's what I personally use.
I love the I love the piece that you talked to me about, and then I ended up picking up myself. I really like it. The I-50.
The I-50.
Yeah, it's pretty slick. All right, there
There
we
you
go.
are. I can see you
Yeah,
now.
yeah, that was weird. I don't know what happened there. I think it may
Yeah,
have lost me.
the I-50 is a pretty good piece.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, it's only 50 watts per channel, but it feels like it's more powerful than that for some reason. Or at least it's got more current than you would expect from a 50-watt amplifier.
Mm, Solid state 50 watts versus tube 50 watts. Typically, you might find that the tube amplifier is a little bit more high current. Not
Yeah.
always, but typically. And so impact and dynamics out of tube 50 watts can sound pretty healthy. That's why we're taking a speaker that right here that typically wants to see 600 watts or better, and we're driving it with a 140-watt monoblock, and it gets up and goes.
Yeah. Yeah, those speakers are beasts. All right, I'll show you some what I was trying to do before it lost me. I was going to hold up some records. I just went to my record shelf and I just grabbed some classics that I either stream or I'll listen to on vinyl. Dark Side of the
Yeah,
Moon is definitely one that's been with me for a long time. Love that.
there's not a lot better than Gilmore on guitar.
He's amazing. Um,
Yep.
let's see. This one which we're going to talk about this guy in a little bit because I know that you used to work with this gentleman, but this record particularly, unplugged, and then the the master recording, whether or not it's digital to whatever, and that whole fiasco, but it still sounds phenomenal on vinyl, and of course digitally it sounds phenomenal as well. Um, I also enjoy this one because it's a if I can get the reflection, it's really well produced, I think, as well. This Michael Jackson
Which
Thriller.
album is that?
Michael Jackson
Thriller, yeah.
Thriller. I mean, even just on like the first couple, man, there we go. Trying to get no reflection. The first couple tracks on that song, or I mean on this record, are really impressive. And Thriller, I mean, you just listen to the imaging as steps walk across, and I mean, it's just really well done. Another one I really like, different kind of genre. It's Lindsey Sterling. She's a violinist, and it's kind of mixture with electronic music and violin. And she's been popular for a while, but I think the first time I heard about her was, I believe it was from one of the Matrix movies soundtrack, either the first one or the second one. She put a track together that was just blew me away. So ever since then, I've been kind of hooked. And then I like Lana Del Rey because I used to have a crush on her. But aside from that, her music also, she's generally produced pretty close to the microphone, so it's really nice and it's sweet for vocals. But then also, there is a bit of bass undertone on a lot of her tracks, which, with a non-neutral piece will really overdo it sometimes in the bass, and sometimes it doesn't sound as good. So I kind of utilize that for that. Speaking of bass, this is a classic, Mezzanine Massive Attack. This is actually vinyls from Germany. Maybe Darko. Darko made that happen. I don't know. I'm just kidding. But this is a really good one, especially like Angel. The song Angel in there is super good. What else? More modern stuff. This is the Tron Legacy soundtrack from Daft Punk.
That's actually a good track.
It
It's
is.
a good
And
soundtrack.
on the home cinema, oh man, it's booming. Like we'll talk about home cinema in a little bit, but this is a great one. The movie too as well to watch for home cinema. And then I'm a huge fan of Elton John. This is one of his newer released albums, not his latest, but newer, I think, probably in the last couple years. And it's really well produced, and just for piano timbre and vocals and everything else, I really enjoy this one. And then these kind of all go together, but Dire Straits is another band I listen to a lot.
Yeah.
And
Mark
they
Mark Knopfler, another great guitar player.
he's one of my favorites, yeah. And his voice, I really enjoy his voice a lot too. And I mean, just the lyrics and the writing is just super well done. And they're pretty interesting because I know that I had read somewhere, because I'm a big fan of theirs, that they had really pushed back a long time and they did not want to go taking their music digitally to CD. And so when they did, they went through this like stringent process of taking it and putting it through multiple analog layers and then bringing it back and going back and forth and just a crazy but a lot of people still say that they have the best, like of the first runs and editions of CDs that were put out, they have some of the best sounding CDs because of that. So he's just a stickler for high quality sound, obviously. And then, I mean, growing up in Oregon, Portland, Oregon, the Grateful Dead was a big thing in my hometown. I mean, this is the first concert I ever went to. But these two albums specifically are actually studio recordings, so they're really well done. They're not like what you would hear at a concert, which varies basically on their setup. But these were just really well recorded. You can really hear, all the details in the music, the differences of the vocal characteristics and timbre of the instruments, and they're just really fun. And I've just listened to them a lot, so I'm super familiar with them. So they've been with me for such a long time that I can really pick up differences. There's, of course, a lot more. I have a huge room playlist. And then for kind of like a vocal jazz, she's one of my favorites, Melody Gardot. This is
Right.
live in Europe. Censor out her butt. There we go. Sorry, Mom. Oh, sorry. Just kidding. But this is a great one. Vocal jazz, really awesome. So there's a few of my favorites. What about anybody else in the chat? Let us know. Oh man, these are heavy. Ugh. Let us know if there's any others you guys have. And we'll go on to the next question while we're waiting for some of those to come in. Let's see. So, working in the music industry, tell us about, or maybe it wasn't working. Maybe you're just relaxing and you just got to see it. Tell us about one of the coolest concert experiences you've ever had, just anywhere in your life.
I think I had two that were particularly memorable. I think this is before I was actually, or that not well, not when I was actually in the industry itself so much. Um, so I was with friends and we were traveling, and I ended up in a bar in Tucson, Arizona. Redneck as hell. It's it was kind of a place that having at that time I think my hair was probably well below my belt line,
That's
and
awesome.
and so I had hair. Uh, so I was, whole part of that whole thing. It was really kind of funny, but I ended up at this bar and had no idea who was playing. Uh, and it ended up that the opening act was a band called Aerosmith.
Nice.
And I was in the group, man. I was listening to these guys hit it, and they were just hammered and bring it home. And I just loved it. And then yeah, I went out. I think I went outside and just tried to get some air. Went back inside. The headliner came on, and I had never heard of these guys. I was going, "What a stupid name!" It was just kind of funny. Turned out to be ZZ Top,
Oh, that's awesome.
and their opening song was Lagrange. So there's a lot of nice girls,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
and so that was probably my first uh, real concert not being, where I wasn't involved in the bands, or I wasn't involved in, doing sound or whatever. And so that was a very fun one. Another one later on in life is I ended up with where was I? Oh, at the Forum in L.A. And again, it was my birthday, but it was I didn't know who I was going to see until I actually got there. And when the band came on, it just sent me into another world, and that band was Earth, Wind, Fire.
Ah, I have one of their I have a few of their vinyl. Yeah, they're awesome. They're really
Yeah.
good.
And so to hear how tight it was, to hear and a shitty venue at the time, it really wasn't a very good venue.
Right.
They've done some audio control recently, but it was just an echo chamber. But where I guess I just happened to be sitting in the exact right spot because it was a very, very impressive concert. And I was in awe the whole time. The musicianship, but the funny part about it is that um, there were guys that. So I used to live in a little 4-bedroom apartment in a city called Playa del Rey, and there was a number of us that were roommates, and there was a guy named Lee Dorman. I don't know if you know that name. He was the bass player for the Iron Butterflies.
Yeah, it sounds familiar.
There was, I think, Larry Dunn, who was the keyboard player, what do you call it, Earth, Wind, and Fire. But early in life, I was 15 years old, and I was in a band called Al McKay and the Turbans, and these three guys came from. I'm trying to remember. I think they came from Chicago,
Okay.
and it turned out to be Verdine, Maurice, and Freddie White. And so they stole Al McKay and a couple other players from this band, and that became Earth, Wind, and Fire. And so that's how I even learned that Earth, Wind, and Fire even existed.
That's cool.
Uh, and that was so I had the two exposures prior to actually hearing them live. When I heard the band live, I no longer had any remorse because they were so good.
Yeah.
Uh, Initially, I had some remorse because we had as Al McCain the Turbans, we had there was this television show American Bandstand. I don't
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
yeah yeah,
We have an
and we
American.
had
We
won
had one in Reno, American Bandstand Place, where I guess they did
yeah
some stuff a long time
and
ago.
yeah, and we had won the Pepsi Boss Band battle that they had. So they let you cut a 45 and they give you new Fender instruments, and I think it was Slingerland drums. I can't remember. The keyboard player got a Fender Rhodes. My cousin, who was the other guitar player, and Alan McKay, with the other guitar player, they both got all Fender Stratocasters and Fender
Sick.
amplifiers. So we got all this free shit, and we got an album. We got a 45 cut. So it was kind of
That's
cool.
cool. Yeah, that's very cool.
Um, and so well, that's kind of it all sort of tied together. And being I don't know who's listening to this or how many people are online, but there's LA was the melting pot for where everything happened, and a lot of R&B artists in that time period would end up going into uh, Motown, and so that was you get to meet all these people. So to meet somebody like James Jamerson, the bass player that played on just about every Motown or album, these guys were all he played with one finger, man.
That's
One
wild.
finger this guy
Yeah.
played with. And he started, as an acoustic bass player, like I did. Um, but I've never seen anybody play that well with one friggin' finger. It was just stunning to watch this guy play, and he was the nicest guy. Some of those guys were just amazing people back in those days. So, being my age, you'd think that I kind of go, "Oh, I'm old now," but actually, I look at it and I say, "Man, I've been able to meet some incredible people."
Yeah.
And from basically the beginning of the fundamentals of electric music,
Yeah.
electric basses, electric guitars, all kind of fun stuff. So you know, when I won the Pepsi Boss Battle thing and got my Fender bass, it was kind of fun because I got to meet the Leo Fender. And so he was kind of a hoot,
That's cool.
crotchety old guy, but he was he was a lot of guys like that were. So and then of course now it's come full circle, right? So I'm doing a project right now with the Ford Shelby GT500 for SEMA coming up this year,
Sweet.
and I did something with Focal and an older GT500, where because the cars were the same color, they were using the same promotional. The car and the speakers were the same exact color, so we used them for trade shows and promotional stuff. And I'm doing the same thing with a company that spun off of the Fender years ago called Music Man, that's now owned
Okay.
by a company called Ernie Ball. And they have just provided me with this amazing Stingray bass that's the exact same color as my GT500.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then last night they called me up and they just we had to postpone the photo shoot but for the car and the bass. And so I've told the guys, I said, man, I'm holding on to this bass too long. I feel like I'm taking advantage. And they gave me the damn bass.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so now I have Fender basses, and then I have, the Music Man basses, and then I don't know if people know, but I build my own basses.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that. That's
So
awesome.
Yeah, so and I do that because I can get a chambered body. A chambered body means that I can take about 3 pounds off the bass. So instead of having an 8 to 9 pound bass, I can have a 7, 7.5 pound bass. Makes it a lot easier to play live, which is really something I love. I like doing sessions, but sessions are an exacting thing. So it's a little more
Sure.
work when you're
Yeah,
playing
totally.
live.
You get the
When you're
energy
playing live,
too. Yeah.
yeah, the live thing is just I just love it. So I get calls from my friends. They go, "Hey, Jason, what are you doing?" And I go, "Nothing. Watching politics go stupid." And then, and then they call me up. They go, "Grab your axe and come on down." And the next thing you know, we're in a jam session. This guy over here is smoking pot, and this guy over here is drinking beer, and me, I'm sitting there just playing bass.
That's cool. I love it.
So it's kind of fun. So that's kind
That's
of some of the fun stuff I get to do.
that's
But I
very
still get
fun.
to, but I've had a lot of influences from a lot of great musicians that are local here that are they come out of the Hollywood area or the San Fernando Valley area, like North Hollywood, and places like that, that are some of the most genius people. Like you just showed the album Thriller, and I believe I think that's the album with Beat It, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So one of my friends, somebody I've known, like we're not really super close at this juncture, but only because we live far apart. But Steve Lukather, the guitar player of Toto, was one of the main guitarists on the song "Beat It." So there was a lot of shareware back in those days between musicians.
Let me double check. Yeah, I believe so. So with that, you actually led into my next question. So you've worked in the industry not just as a musician, but you did audio engineering, front of house, I believe, for a lot of different famous
Right.
musicians. In fact, I held up one of the records earlier for one of the legends that you. Hopefully, I don't go out of focus again.
He just did.
Oh man. Well, here we'll put you back to the main. That's weird. I don't know why it keeps doing that. But basically, once I get it back in focus, I'll show you worked with Eric Clapton, and he is one of my favorites. He's just so good, so good. Tell us a little bit about what it was like working with him, and I'll get my camera fixed while you're doing that.
So, many of the artists I worked with were particularly good musicians, and I think they were kind of. I think they were all an enjoyable type of perfectionist. I can't think of one that was um, aggro or a pain in the ass or prima donna kind of people. They were all pretty good. Eric was one of them. And so I think the reason they hired me is because I approached the sound not from loud. I approached it from trying to make it sound like the actual recording or get the vibe correct, right? And so a lot of guys hired me because I was the hi-fi. Some of the guys would reference me as the hi-fi front of house sound engineer. So I didn't make your ears bleed. And the only person that ever complained that I didn't mix loud enough was a guy named Gene Simmons from Kiss.
That's funny.
And
Well,
so, uh,
it makes a huge
but
difference.
no,
It does make a huge difference because I've been to I've been to a lot of shows because I've been a photographer professionally for a long time, and that was one of the main gigs I did, especially as I was younger. As I photographed a lot of different musicians, and you will hear a difference in sound based on who is running that board and who's running the front of the house, and it makes a humongous difference. Also, where you're
well,
sitting too. Like I've become so spoiled now when I go to a concert, if I can't get a seat somewhere in the sweet spot, I sometimes won't go, which is, I don't know. Maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing, I don't know. But
well, depending on how the arena is acoustically set, or how the engineer mixes, you could end up with a sweet spot that's on a hard left or right hand side.
that's true.
Uh, if you were fortunate enough to hear one of my mixes, then the sweet spot was directly in front of the mixing console. So I mixed to my ears, but in today's world, there's so much DSP that you can mix for an entire room if you take the time to do it correctly.
Yeah.
But I've mixed rooms that had 80,000 seats,
Yeah.
and that's where it gets pretty picky. In
Sure.
1969, I was one of the guys that got stuck as a. I was supposed to be a second engineer, ended up mixing most of it for about an hour at an event called Woodstock. If you ever heard of that.
Yes. Most definitely.
And then 2 months later, I was in the army.
Yeah.
So, and
Well, at
then
least you
not
got
too
to go
long after
do.
that,
At least you got Woodstock before you left. That's cool.
no, Woodstock was horrific. If you ever read about
Yeah.
it, it
It.
was the
it
most smelly, nasty, horrible. That is the ugliest memory of my career. Not that the people were bad, but oh my God,
they weren't
it was
prepared. They weren't
irritating.
prepared at all. Like, yeah, the documentary on Netflix does a super good job of kind of showing how bad the
They have a documentary on Netflix?
yeah, yeah, and it goes through all the preparations that didn't happen, and then like history repeated itself. They did another documentary on how that happened again back in the 90s. Not quite as bad, like not to the same
Right.
level as the original
But
fiasco, but
but
it
not the same
happened again.
producers. Yeah,
I
not the
don't.
same
I
producers.
don't. I don't think so. I don't remember that
No,
part, but
no.
it was interesting to see just how ill prepared they were for the mass number of people basically for those events.
Right.
So yeah, that's cool. I would have liked to have seen a Woodstock, but I don't know. Based on what you're telling me, maybe I wouldn't have. I think in the
Oh,
documentary they had people like literally like I don't even want to say it on the stream, but it was not sanitary at all.
no,
Uh,
it was
it was
horrible.
bad. Yeah.
I mean,
Um,
it smelled so bad that I almost felt like I was going to puke at any given moment. It was horrible.
yeah.
And then
Yeah.
when it rained, it just got worse.
That's what they talked about, and how everything was. So there was just a mixture of stuff that you don't want to be
Mud,
waiting around
feces,
it.
and urine. Yep.
That's it. That's it. Yeah. And I was just
and
like,
and
oh god.
hippies having sex during all that, sitting in the
Oh.
middle of it. I'm going, this
Oh.
is disgusting,
No.
horrible.
No. Oh no. That's not good. Oh God. Okay. Shifting gears. What era of hi-fi do you think was the most significant in history?
I think I think the maybe the late '60s to the early '70s was probably the most formidable. We had some of the greatest tube amplifiers being developed. We had a lot of really good engineers coming up with great ideas. Solid state was getting better. And of course, solid state is known for speed. And that was a whole new gig for people because everybody was used to some sort of valve amplifier setup.
Sure.
We were leaving the stereo console world, where the speaker, turntable, and everything was in this
Big
piece of
box.
furniture
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
mom and dad would have. And we were going into components and separates. And so I think that was, I mean, you had Saul Morantz making amplifiers that were stunning. You had Bongiorno and um, Morris Kessler who developed SAE, and you had Macintosh, you had ARC, Audio Research, so many really good people. You had Bob Carver, who I met at a Mac clinic where I think it was an MJB coffee can, where he built an amplifier, put it in it. So Mac used to do these clinics, and Bob brought this amplifier in for testing to see how it rated, and nobody wanted to touch it because it looked dangerous. But Bob Carver, and so subsequently Carver and some of the Sunfire stuff were uh, one of the players, and so Bob had developed, I think, a company called Phase Linear way back in those days, and it was known for catching on fire. So there was a lot of interesting products being made, but the development, even though there were errors and some poor designs, so the development back in those days. So you have guys like John Curl. I don't know if you heard of him, but he's the company Mark Levinson.
Sure.
Uh, I think Mark Levinson has no engineering background. He's just a salesman. Uh, but he found John Curl, and John Curl is who created the Levinson product. Had it not been for John, Mark Levinson would probably still be a shoe salesman. Um, but uh, but yeah, there was a lot of good stuff that was coming out. I mean, JBL was JBL, right?
Sure.
Um, they weren't. It wasn't some huge conglomerate owned by Sidney Harmon, right?
Right.
But eventually, and no, there's a lot of good stuff. There was British speaker companies were doing a bang up job. There was Quad. There was a lot of companies coming out of the UK. Europe wasn't developing quite as much as you might think. And I think about 30 years ago is when uh, the Japanese companies like Yamaha or something started coming up,
Sure.
where they were developing uh, better products. And roughly about 25 years ago is when China started getting into hi-fi and cars. Before
Yeah.
that, they weren't even into cars. Were a very rare thing 25, 30 years ago in China. And hi-fi was something that was new to them.
Yeah.
Uh, so I'd say, yeah, if we go back and we say, what is the milestone for where hi-fi really went through its first iteration of development? I'd say late 60s is where that started. And Saul Morant's made some brilliant stuff. I thought he
Oh
was.
yeah. Yep. Yeah, I was thinking about him when you were talking too. Do you think we're going to be heading into another golden age of hi-fi, or do you think we're in one, or it's just, and we'll look back at this time period in history with all this different technology and all the improvements we've seen in digital analog converters and, like you were saying, DSP, whether it be Dirac or other different things. What do you think when we look back like 20 years from now at this period in time? What do you think we'll say about this period of hi-fi?
I think that right now, even though digital engineering has been around for a while, I think that right now we're entering into a real, in the last, I don't know, 5, 6, maybe 8 years, we've been stepping into a real digital realm that's starting to sound more analog. And
Hmm.
and of course, the idea is to get rid of the snap, crackle, and pop of vinyl or the hiss
Sure.
from coming from tape.
Yep.
So the media itself, or the medium itself, is I think starting to mature to a point where the young people can anticipate a much better quality of music from the standpoint of its recording. And if the youngsters doing the recording are doing the school, they're actually learning how to do it correctly. I think that the younger generations are going to experience some amazing quality of music.
I agree. I have a buddy who's a music producer, mostly in the electronic music space, and I remember talking to him even a few years ago about what he's putting out his recordings in, and a lot of artists, and he was already putting them out in high resolution, but there's a lot of artists we had talked about and producers that weren't even putting them out in high res yet. Still, they were still just doing, you know, CD quality or less than CD quality. So I think you're right. I think we will see better and better because it's becoming more and more popular. I mean, even in the last 2 years, high res music streaming services have grown so much. And love them or hate them, Amazon helped with that because they're now providing one of the cheapest, high res audio streaming services platforms out there. So they've expanded it into so many additional households. So it's been helpful. So I think you're right. I think in the next few years, it's going to continue to get better and better. Let me go to the comments and questions and see what we got here. See, this is why I had my glasses on. Let me look over here, actually. Tyler said, these are great stories. Thank you for sharing, Jason. And then whoever I is, it says random, but where did you get your tattoos? Oh, geez. I've had my tattoos done by several artists, but three main artists. The next is what was the artist and his Instagram account? Oh, boy. Okay. So John Potter at Evolution at Tattoo. This is in Reno. He's done some of my work. Jason Freeman, Wolf City Tattoo in Reno. He's done some of my work. and that's for the upper half of my body. And then the lower half, I'm starting March, and that's going to be done by Kenny Tavern. Kenny Tavern. So, and you can, I think, you can find him on Instagram, Kenny Tavern Art. There you go, if that helps. Um, that is a random question. I don't think I've ever been asked that. See you, Tyler. Thanks for joining, buddy. All right. Now, going back to that, so we have vintage Macintosh gear versus today's Macintosh. So, like, kind of like you're talking about, some of like the MC275 and some of the original stuff that was coming out. How do you think Macintosh, because you've been, I mean, involved with selling Macintosh, listening to Macintosh, around Macintosh. How do you think the sound has changed from vintage Macintosh to the components of today?
That's a pretty fair question. I think the improvement primarily is well, it's in two places and very fundamentally necessary places. Um, they've achieved an amazing mid-range presentation
Yes.
in
Yeah.
the last 20 years, maybe 25 years, that I think is just it's just silk on my ears.
Yep.
And that's part of it. The autoformer made a big difference. Uh, and so I think that that aspect of what they're doing is better. Being able to get the same amount of power at no matter what the impedance uh, is more bang for your buck. It's if you're on an 8 ohm component or you're on a 4 ohm or 2 ohm component, but you're always getting 300 watts or whatever the component's supposed to deliver, is a good thing. So if you listen to, say, the original MC275, it sounds quite a bit different than I think what we're on right now, which is the
Six, I think.
Gen 6.
Gen 6, yeah, I think so. Yep.
Yeah. So Gen 6 is cooler. It's got LEDs that go, bling, bling, bling.
Yeah, right.
Uh, and so that part of it is kind of cool. So they've sort of, entered into the new world of bling, I guess. But
Sure.
the improvement in sound is better. I mean, the same beautiful massive mid-range exists, but I I think that what we've achieved is better detail and better dynamics over time. So if we compare a 275 from Gen 1, 2, or 3 to Gen 5 or 6, there's a if you're really paying attention, there's quite a bit of difference. And
So,
so, depending on what it is, it could be an enormous amount of difference. I mean, it's even their CD transports are good. I think Macintosh has done a lot of interesting things. I think there's um, probably only one place in the Macintosh world that I'm not 100% aligned with. Um, and that I personally think if you're going to buy, say, for example, a theater processor, and it's going to cost you above $2,000 or $3,000, I think at that point it should be modular, so that you should be able to upgrade the HDMI board. And so if you're
yeah.
going from 1080p to 4K to 8K or whatever, that you can upgrade those things without having to buy a new one. And when these things start costing 8, 9,000, or like the new MX180, which is
8,000, I think.
17,000,
Yeah.
no, that's
799
18,000.
or some, yeah, something like that.
No,
The,
that's the 123A.
yeah, the
The
new one, whatever it
180,
was, yeah. Oh, okay,
the
okay, yeah.
180 you're talking about the receiver,
Yeah, the new one that just
right?
got announced, yeah,
That
that one.
MH, yeah, the MHT 300. That's
Yeah,
actually a pretty
yeah.
cool piece.
It looked pretty cool. I was
Um,
excited when I saw that. I was like, actually, this is pretty. I mean, and for the price, it seemed like it was pretty good value for a Macintosh piece for what you're getting.
I think that I think that at that kind of numbers is where we start kind of the industry itself has to be kinder to the consumer and make that modular component exist. But when you're down into the two, three, four, $5,000 range, it's not practical because the cost is too
Sure.
expensive.
Yeah.
And hopefully they'll get past that. But when you start getting up into the 17, 18, $19,000 range, if it doesn't have an upgrade path, then
Yeah.
I have a conflict. Um, so my home theater uses a brand called Storm Audio
Okay.
because it's modular, it's upgradable, but the amplifier complement is Macintosh.
Okay.
And the reason it's Macintosh is because it's fast. I don't. They're not tube amplifiers, of course,
Right.
um, and they're not hybrids. They're straight up solid state. Theater is about dynamics because I like listening to James Bond blow shit up.
Yes, sir. Me too.
so, so,
Absolutely.
or I just like the quick responses. I like it to be inaccurate. I'm not watching uh, girl movies where it's about girls running
Dramas
around.
and love and
Yeah, I'm not.
romance. Yeah,
That might be more my wife's thing,
sure.
but when she watches stuff, I don't even know what it is because it's in Chinese and I have no clue what's going on. And so if it doesn't say dim sum or something on it, I get lost.
No, yeah. If there's
So
no subtitles.
yeah, well, I did watch a thing about what was it? I watched a Jackie Chan movie last night that I didn't even know existed. Um,
He's
it
badass.
was
Jackie Chan's badass.
uh, they made him. I guess he's gone through some plastic surgery
Has he
because
really?
the movies. Yeah,
Wow.
but it was kind of cool. I mean, it was Cusick was in it. I can't remember the name of the movie. It had its ups and downs, but dynamically, and whoever did the recording was kind of cool. Did some interesting stuff, and so I was more lost in listening to the sound field and trying to put it together with the video, and so I was kind of there, but you know over over the movie, I kept noticing that they kept bringing in artists or actors that were known big time actors, which is not typical in a Jackie Chan movie,
Sure.
other than maybe Chris Tucker in
Right, right,
what's
right.
what are those
Oh gosh. Oh, I forgot, but I know exactly
Rush
what you're
Hour?
talking about. Rush Hour. There you go. Yep, that's it.
Yeah, I mean those are just hilarious, and Chris
Those are
Tucker is just.
hilarious. Yeah, he's
I've,
funny.
I've I've actually seen Chris Tucker do a comedy show down here in Hermosa Beach. I mean, the guy had me. He's kind of like Jim Carrey. They just the stuff that they come up with out of their head. It's just so funny. My stomach hurts when I leave those comedies. I'll tell you a funny story. My brother and I were at that Hermosa Beach Comedy and Magic Club. Jim Carrey was a brand new comedian at the time, and my brother and I were just belligerent assholes. We went in there and we started heckling him, and Jim Carrey put us in our place, something fierce. And at that point, he became my king. If you can put my brother and I, when we're together, we're devastating if we start coming at you. And he not only handled it, but he put us in our place. I mean, I literally walked out of there with my tail between my legs. He was, and then I see him outside afterwards, and he is just, I mean, the sweetest guy.
Yeah,
And he actually walked up and he said, "Sorry, man, but you were heckling me. I had to do that to you." And I go,
that's
"No,
funny.
it's okay. I deserved it. It was kind of fun."
That's funny. Um, okay. Well, that kind of answers my question about the Macintosh gear because that's one we sometimes get. Social. I see that sometimes in social. I think I eventually got to add some kind of Macintosh to my system at home, and I don't know what it's going to be yet. But part of me really likes the idea of that the maybe like two MC275s running mono to the Sonus Fabers. So there's something about that because that's just the classic Macintosh amp. So but I gotta listen to it next time I come down. I gotta listen to it more with my speakers maybe. So you talked to us a little bit about your home cinema setup already. Does your home cinema do double for music listening too?
No,
Okay,
no,
what do you so
I have a.
yeah, tell us what you got.
So the theater is dedicated. So I mean, I can listen to music in there. So if there's a Blu-ray disc or something that's
Sure.
particularly good, one of my favorite Blu-ray discs for music presentation is Jeff Beck at Ronnie Laws or something, some nightclub. And then another one, Toto, and I think it's the 35th anniversary from out of a recording done in Poland. Um, and that recording was done particularly good. So there's a few Eric Clapton
Yeah.
recorded at the Royal Hall. These are these are recordings that are, if you can appreciate those formats of music. These are recordings that are just done so nicely. If you're not into that kind of music, of course, it's not going to be appealing, but they're done so nicely. There's another one. I'm trying to remember the name of a lyre recording that they managed to convert to Blu-ray recently, that I have, done by Stevie Ray Vaughan, that I thought was old school because it was analog, it was noisy, it was, ugh, but it was real.
Real, yeah,
And so,
authentic.
but, and so I kind of liked it just because it was so unperfect that it was perfect.
Right. That's cool. Yeah. Well, authenticity in music is also there's something special about it too. Um,
Mhm.
okay, so what do you use for your? I know you're a Sonos Faber speaker lover. I know you love a lot of different speakers, but you have what speakers do you have? The
At
Aidas?
home, I have the, I know I have the Amati.
Amadis, that's it. Amadis.
Yeah.
Wow, those are badass. And you have those paired with Macintosh amps?
No, I have those paired with audio research. So you
Oh,
know
okay.
the amplifiers that are behind me, those
Ah,
are
okay.
mono. I have the stereo version, so it's a single chassis, 140 watts. So it's got the two ghost meters going. It's kind of cool.
Ah, I love those ghost meters. Those things are sweet. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I basically have that, and as a power amp, the preamp I'm using is the one I designed for SAE,
That
the Mark
which
One.
is fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic preamp. Cool. Very cool. Okay. Let's see. And we got a few more questions and then we'll wrap up. So, for, let's see, when you're listening to headphones or speakers or amplifiers or source components, what are the most important traits of those products you're looking for when you're creating a system for yourself, like at home that you've created, or if you're designing one for a client? Obviously, a client is going to tell you to an extent what they're looking for, but what are some things that are like really important for you as you're building those systems for yourself or a client?
Well, building one for myself is a little bit different idea because, owning the Source AV, I have, plug and play at any given point. Like
Right.
I can bring something home, I can check it out.
Yep.
What I do for a client is entirely different. So to understand a client better, what I try to do is teach the client more about how to judge or to the process, the thinking process for which they would come to a conclusion, rather
Sure.
than me say, "Hey, you want this?" Um, I don't, playing salesman is not a game I have any interest in.
Right.
So what I try to do is say, let's find out what you want. Let's find out what it is you like. Let's see what really lights up your emotions,
Yeah.
because music is all about emotions.
100%. Yep.
And so I try to find that, and then I will try to steer them to those types of products, and then uh, help them understand what creates more clarity, if that's what they're looking for, what softens a presentation if they've got. Like I run into people that we sell B&W, but B&W is kind of a bright speaker.
Sure. Yep.
Some people end up selling their B&Ws off when all they really needed to do was just change the cable.
Yeah. Or
So
an amp or a different amp pairing or something.
yeah,
Yeah. Or
yeah,
DAC or
yeah,
something. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And so a lot of times it's just a matter of cabling, and sometimes you're right. Sometimes it's a DAC or an amplifier. If it's a bright amplifier on a bright speaker with a bright cable, it's going to go, ugh, it kind of gets over bright.
Yep.
And that's where ear fatigue comes in. And so identifying where the challenges are for the consumer is fun. So
Yeah.
there are people online that I think are just crazy, but I mean, they call me up and they ask me questions, based on a few questions that I ask them, I'll give them a response of what I think. They're mostly generalized answers, but then they come up on Yelp and they go, "This guy knows exactly what he's talking about. He told me blah blah ABC, and then ABC not only worked, but it made it way better than I thought it would." It's just paying attention. It's
Well,
just
and
listening.
experience and the experience too over time, I'm sure has helped you
Well,
do that.
it's knowing what metallurgies are affected in wire. It's knowing those are things, but the room itself has
Totally.
it's a player in it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Especially with two channel.
And so almost every time I've answered the questions, I've answered the questions based on having no knowledge of the environment. And so there's a bit of guessing, but I listen closely and I try to find out what people are trying to achieve, and I might be able to give them a good idea towards that path.
You did for me. You hooked. Yeah. You gave me some great ideas. Pretty much everything you recommended. I mean, I love it. Let's see. Tell us about your headphone setup. We haven't talked much about uh, headphone setup. Tell us about what you listen to at home and your amp and your headphones.
Okay. So, um, I listen to, um, well, live, when I'm playing music as a reference, I'm listening to Ultimate Ear, and because they're in ears, they're molded. I can send them back in with a new mold and say, hey, I need to modify this.
Yeah.
As time goes on, because your ear canal changes.
Yep.
So for live music, for travel, when I'm in the backyard with my son and we're, sparring with Muay Thai or something, and he kicks my ass. I'm getting old, and so my son's hardcore into it. But
That's awesome.
had he caught me at the same age he is, I would have
Well,
whooped
yeah,
his ass.
different story. Yeah, totally.
So, but uh, but yeah, so it's I will wear the in ears in those. But in my general listening, if I'm just kicking back and I'm trying to avoid the noise of the wife and dog, things like that,
Sure.
uh, I might use I do use a stealth sometimes.
Yeah, it's a good set of headphones.
Sometimes I'll use the Meza Elite.
Elite. Oh, I love those. Those are great. Those are actually, well, trying not to knock anything over. There's too much stuff on my desk. I was listening to them earlier, actually, with this little Woo WA8 before we started the stream, just kind of listening to different headphones. And yeah, it's one of my favorites too. Sorry, go
But
on.
I think but for the most part, I think the headphone that I go to is the OG uh, Focal Utopia.
Yep.
So I think mine is like serial number 40 or something. So it's
Oh,
been around. And am I frozen? Can you see what I'm doing? There you
yeah,
go.
you're
Yes,
back. I
I'm
don't know.
back.
Yeah, the internet signal on your end must have dipped for a second because you froze and I was looking at mine and I'm still going. So yeah, you're okay now though. The last thing I heard
Okay.
was serial number 40 OG Utopia.
Yeah. So I have a couple of amplifiers at home. One of them is one from made by Alex Cavalli. It's called a Liquid Gold,
Nice.
and it's a it's a very nice piece. I've done a couple of things to it that I think enhance it a little, its stability a little bit.
Dan Clark has
But
one, I
generally,
think, too. Yeah, I think he had one.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a great amp.
Uh, but then I also now have what you might call an MHA 200, but not really anymore. So
A modified
it's
MHA 200?
yeah. So I've been I've been discussing I don't know what number they're going to put on it, but I've been back and forth with them on what's going to be an MHA 250 or an MHA
Whatever it
300
is.
or
Yeah, yeah.
whatever model number they attach to it. I've got it up to about a volt and a half output now. So
Whoa. Okay. Nice.
I've eliminated the unity gain the way they did it. I made it so that there's actually a unity gain input, so you don't have to fuss with the knob.
Right.
So it's a 1-to-1 ratio, right?
Okay, cool.
Uh, and uh, and so um, I've looked at the chassis configuration and figured out how we can do a modular DAC. So if it's a Macintosh piece, they're big in Saber DACs.
Yeah.
Uh, so I've been fussing with the D2 and the D3, or the DA2 and the DA3,
Yeah.
the newest of the DACs, right?
Right.
Uh, and so Macintosh is mostly they've just gone from DA1 to the DA2, and now the DA3 is something that is being looked at for future products.
Right.
Uh,
Because
but
of the
I'm
new
looking
chip.
at it. I think that the if they do this iteration of amplifier, I think that they should start it with a DA3. Because headphone guys are picky about their DACs. Stop
If,
being so damn picky.
yeah, they like the most current. They like the most current stuff, right? I mean, it's
Well,
true.
yeah, the newest widget isn't always the best widget, but
That's true.
Sabre
Yeah.
makes good DACs.
Well, it's a good point you bring up though, because most of the time you don't see people swapping through large tower speakers nearly as fast as they do headphones and headphone systems. Um, maybe because of the size, weight, or cost. But you're right. I mean, I think headphone listeners are more picky, and they do tend to always want that next best thing, or they're trying to find that next best thing.
Yeah.
For tubes and solid states, you kind of already answered this question. You have both at home. So you said for your home cinema, it's all Macintosh solid state, and then for your listening room, you've got the audio research tube. So there's no real preference for you. You enjoy both. So obviously,
Oh yeah.
so yeah, same as me. I like both
I
too.
do. I am partial. I think that the Macintosh, excuse me, I think that the Macintosh hybrid methods are really great, where the tube soak is on the input and then the output stays a solid state. Then you get the best of both worlds. You get that nice, warm, juicy tone, and then you get that speed. And when you can combine that correctly, that's a really good thing. I think that I'd like to see companies like Audio Research approach that. It's not really what their forte is or where
Right.
that company comes from, but I think speed is, as a musician, I've always recognized that speed is important. I'll tell you another funny story. So a long time ago, you remember the band The Doors?
Of course, love them. Yeah.
So my family knew Ray Manzarek, the keyboard player,
Okay.
and I was at an age where I was trying to become an electric bass player. Mom and Dad were saying, "Oh hell no," but Grandpa had gone to, I think, every pawn shop in the area, probably all the way out. We're about 30, 40 minutes now away from LA, but I think he went all the way into LA looking at pawn shops to find a Fender Precision bass for me. And he found one that was not particularly in good shape, but it was a Fender Precision bass. And Ray Manzarek knew I wanted to be an electric bass player, so he gave a bass amplifier that he used for his keyboard bass to a buddy of mine, Dave Thorpe, I think was his last name, and had him bring that electric bass amp to me, and it was blown up. But back in those days, those kind of amplifiers were so easy to repair.
Yeah, you could service them.
It probably took me about an hour to fix the amplifier, but it had a 15-inch speaker in the box, um, and uh, I just couldn't afford it, right? I just couldn't afford to buy one. It was for me, it was pretty expensive, and my mom and dad were not going to give me money for that. They weren't going to help me, and so what ended up happening was my dad actually surprised me one day, and he came home with 11 4.5-inch drivers,
Mm.
and he said, "Go get a saw out and cut the baffle out and put a new baffle in and put these speakers in, and I'll show you how to wire it." It was easy, it's just a series parallel kind of configuration.
Sure.
And I couldn't get a gig as an electric bass player because the detail was so fast and non-muddy on the bass. It was like playing a piano string. And nobody wanted to hire me because back in those days, everything was just fat, muddy,
Yeah.
boom, 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 slow
Yep.
responses, right? And this was just fast as think.
Yeah.
so, so fast makes a big difference. It creates a huge amount of detail. And so I'm a big fan of speed, but I've never really gotten away from how juicy a tube can help you on the
Right.
presentation of audio.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's nice to have the options for both, or like you said, like what is it, the MA 12,000 integrated tube
Oh, that's
hybrid?
awesome. Yeah,
Yeah, like that.
yeah,
That thing's
so the MA 12,000, the C 12,000, and their new MCD 12,000. So you got that tube soak on the CD on that DAC, right? It's just those
so
things are
cool.
that's when they came out with that, I was so looking forward to actually seeing the deliverable production pieces. This is great. It's not cheap. It's
No,
and,
no, yeah, but
but
still,
it's uh, but it's
if you
still
can
great.
if you can afford it, you're going to be happy with it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, rob a
oh,
bank.
we're just joking. uh,
Yeah,
um,
I don't mean that really.
not literally. YouTube people, don't do that. All right, let's see. I think we're on to our last question. So, for the viewers who haven't been to our badass 10,000 square foot showroom in Torrance, California, or shopped with us yet online, what makes TSAV different in the experience that we provide both in store and online from other retailers?
Marcello,
I mean, I
I
know this,
think
but it's more for the other people watching. But
well, it's a hard question for me to answer because I don't know that I pay attention to the other companies.
no, that's good.
I
That's
mean,
fair. Yeah.
it's so there's headphones.com. If you're in the headphone world, there's Moon Audio. They're all good companies. There's nothing really wrong with them. And so I think I think we're a little bit different in that um, I'm not interested in having any of my staff or myself sell something.
Right.
And so I think that that's where we are particularly different is that um, I'm more interested in teaching somebody and empowering them with the ability to sell themselves by knowing how to pick the product better.
Yeah. Totally.
I think I think it's just philosophy. Uh, some of these companies stock higher volumes than we do on certain things, and so they might have it more readily available than we might. In some cases, we stock way higher volumes than
Right.
they do, and being that we are like Moon is sort of trying to be a hi-fi store. Headphones.com is headphones. There you go, right? We are an answer in almost every aspect. So we are headphones. We're two channel. Uh, we're home theater. We're a full automation company. We can automate corporate entities. We can automate your home. Um, so it's a little bit different because we're an engineering company. On the other side of the source AV is me, and then that's where I get involved in helping companies design products. Um, and so some of that is just me providing opinion or maybe giving them insight to techniques on how to get things done. And some of that is where I actually design the stuff, like with SAE and a couple other
Right.
brands. Um, but it's I think the source is only different in that it's major engineering and more trying to figure out the best way to empower the consumer with the knowledge to make a good decision that is not coerced by a salesperson. I'm not. To me, sometimes
Yeah.
the audio industry seems like it's like going to a used car lot. Buy
Totally.
this because it's awesome. It's only
Yeah.
got 10 miles on it. Yeah, after
Yeah.
you change the odometer.
Yeah.
so,
Exactly. Yeah.
so, and there's so much to know. I mean, tubes. I mean, there's an amazing difference between Sovtech and JJ and all these different tubes and how they all affect things, right? Um, so teaching people the general nature of these things really helps them make a good decision. And so that's you'll know if you guys ever catch anybody in my store trying to sell you something, then I want you to tell me immediately because I'll pick them up by their rear belt loop and throw them out. I'm not particularly into sales guys.
No, and I've noticed that just being down there. I mean, I've never been in the. I don't sell. That's not my job. I'm here to create content. But when I'm down there and I've just watched Wayne or you talking to customers, it's more like just a conversation about what they like, what they're interested in, and you're just kind of like a guide almost, if you will, guiding them the route down the right path. Essentially, is what I've seen, and same with Wayne. And there's no there's no pushiness whatsoever. So
Right.
I
It's
think I
just
think
like
it's
with you.
nice.
It's when we brought you on board and we started having you do the videos, you remember that I said we're not selling this product, we're
Yep,
explaining the product.
explaining it and
And
presenting it, and just giving our experiences about it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I
And
like that.
so it is, that's just, I think that's a more friendly way of approaching it. And I think that it's better for the consumer who's spending the money. So the idea is, how does that, if that consumer is going to spend money that really has a pretty weak ROI, return on investment, I'm going to tell you. And I'll explain to you why. I'm not going to make the statement and just leave you there hanging. I'm going to tell you why I think there's no ROI, that the ROI is not appropriate. But you're spending money. Some of this stuff can get damn expensive. So when I was a kid, nobody ever considered that you could spend 50, 60, 70, $80,000 on a headphone rig,
Yeah,
right?
it's
And
wild.
today you can do that if you pay attention. You can do that really easy.
Yeah,
And so, you know, I when somebody's there or spending $2,000 or $1,500 or $1,000, uh, I just like to make sure that they're informed enough and looking for the right things, like, when does ear fatigue set in? Why does ear fatigue set in? When does sweat affect your eardrum? And how does your eardrum sweat? Because your eardrum sweats by adding wax to your drum,
right.
right? And when it does that, it's protecting yourself, it's protecting your ear, and you might be hammering your ear with an abundance of loud sound. And you could be 21 years old, and at 23, you have major hearing loss
Hearing loss.
problems.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yep.
But ear fatigue is the most common. And so anybody who buys something, whether it's hi-fi, home theater, or headphones, and you've made that decision within the first 15 minutes of listening, you're probably going to be making a mistake. You want to listen to it longer
Totally.
because you want to know that you're not going to experience ear fatigue. And then subsequently, you end up with a purchase that's it's not making you happy.
Yeah. Or you have to try to search now for that secret amp that's going to make it less fatiguing or whatever it is. And that's the whole
Yeah,
system matching thing that some people do, right? They spend like 5 grand on
right.
a pair of headphones because they bought it online. They didn't even get to come into the store to listen to it, just based on something that somebody said. And then now they hear it with their rig at home, and they're like, "Holy crap! This THX amp with this set of headphones, like my ears are bleeding." And then the next thing you know, they're like,
Well,
"Ah,
that's a bad part about buying online exclusively. And,
yeah,
yes, there are companies um, that are selling things that you can return very easily, and that's great. That's nothing wrong with that. Um, and it's an audition process. The downside to that is only to the reseller, really. In that you end up with a lot of open stuff that you don't know how it was treated. I mean, what if you got a pair of Utopias where the guy was just hammering it and kept, just spanking the voice coil, and it was popping and pissing and moaning?
yeah."
Then you're very likely to end up with if you're buying it used from the guy, then you could be ending up with, you know, a, a, a product that could die soon. And
Yeah,
that's not
early
a good
failure.
thing. That's not to say that Utopia and Full Cow are not good. It's just
You're just using it
it's
as
to
an
say that,
example. Yeah,
yeah, anything that's being abused is likely to fail sooner than something that's not.
right, 100%. Yeah, and I think also too, some other retailers they limit their policies as well, because you can't just return everything forever without eventually having to change the policies or adapt your policy for certain customers, because otherwise everybody would just be buying stuff and holding it for 6 months and returning it, or for 2 months and then returning it, and just cycling through, because every 2 months something new comes out. So it's like, yeah, no, I get it. That makes sense. Okay, cool. Let's go to the chat and see if there's any other questions. We still have a few people left with us. If any of you guys have any questions for Jason or I out there, shoot us a question. Um, and in the meantime, I don't know if you've been watching it or not. Do you watch HBO? You have HBO Max? Have you seen
Me,
the
yes.
Have you seen the Last of Us series yet? I bet your son is into it. Has he watched it and talked to you about it yet?
No, he's not mentioned anything to me, and I haven't seen it. I think the only thing that I really pay attention to on HBO, I think the only series I pay attention to is sort of a a political comedy series. Bill Maher.
Yeah. Yep, yep. I uh, I have seen his show lots. He's pretty funny. You should check it out. Ask him about it because if he hasn't seen it yet, he'll be into it. I think it's really good. It's called The Last of Us, and it's based on, oh gosh, the he's the Mandalorian, the star Pedro Pascal.
Oh,
Pascal.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he
So
plays
yeah,
the
yeah,
he plays the main character. It's kind of like a I don't want to say it's zombie, but it is similar to like a zombie end of the world type thing. But it's actually HBO just announced it's their greatest viewership of any show in history. It surpassed everything. So
wow.
check it out on your system. It would probably scare the shit out of you because there's all kinds of crazy stuff happening, and I imagine in your theater room you're gonna be like, "Whoa!" Probably be pretty cool.
So
Um, uh,
I've seen a few things. Like what was it? I've seen a few episodes of things like Game of Thrones. I can't. Was that on
yeah, yeah.
HBO?
Game of Thrones is HBO. Yeah, yep.
So I'm not sure why, but those kinds of television shows don't appeal to
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, they're pretty gruesome. I mean, they're pretty violent and gruesome. But I would say Game of Thrones was really good until the last season. The last season was
me.
terrible. And if you watched that last
So
season and that's when you picked up on it a couple years ago or whatever it was, you're probably like, "This is crap," because the last season was bad. So, uh,
yeah, I just remember that I was watching it when they first introduced the the blonde lady and the dragon.
yeah. Khaleesi, yeah, Khaleesi,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And I just I sat through about 30 minutes of it.
You're like, I can't get into
I
it.
think I was just so bored I fell asleep. It was- but if I'm watching things like a series of movies, like if I'm watching John Wick 1, 2, and 3,
Oh, those are
right?
on HBO right now. Yeah, I
You know,
actually just did that the other night. I watched them all the way through. It was
yeah,
awesome.
it's kind of I like doing that, binge watching movies like that. And then I- when I can't remember how long ago it was, but it was a number of years back, where I watched 1 through I think 9 of the Star Wars.
The Star Wars series is awesome. I love Star
Yeah,
Wars.
so I spent the weekend doing that because I couldn't do 9 movies in one day. I would have just been
Yeah,
oversaturated. My head would have exploded.
that's a lot. Yeah, that's a lot to do in one day. It's too much.
But there's been movie series, that I would watch if it was a 1, 2, or 3 type uh, movie series. I would watch them back to back sometimes, and then sometimes like the new movie Wakanda Forever came out recently, right?
Yeah, that was great.
Uh,
Yeah,
and so my son and I saw that. We went to go see it in the movies,
yeah,
and so if it's and we enjoyed it. But just a couple days back, uh, I just got a wild hair and I watched Black Panther back to right in front of Wakanda
yep,
Forever,
yep.
and then and let the two kind of join together, and it actually made it a much better movie experience for me.
I like that too. I did the exact same thing when I went to see Wakanda Forever. I watched it the night before, and then the next day I went and saw, um, or I watched Black Panther and then went and saw Wakanda Forever the next day. I like that too.
Yeah.
All
But
right, I
TV series in general are probably not
not
not my cup
not
of
your
tea.
favorite, yeah.
No.
It looks like we don't have any other questions, so I think with that we've been going for almost an hour and a half, which is awesome. So
Holy smokes, we're having fun.
yeah, we are having fun. So I think with that we could wrap up and tell everybody thank you so much for joining us. Jason, thanks for coming on with me today. This is fun. I've been here a while now, and I'm surprised we haven't done this yet, and I'm really glad we did. So it gives people more insight to how cool your experience is and how cool your life has been getting to this point to co-founding TSAV, and you bring all that experience, especially from the music industry, and into what you do every day, which is fantastic for the customers and is the end result, I think, for a better experience. And yeah, I think let me look one more time to see if there's any others. No, thanks again, Tyler, and everybody else that joined us. With that, I don't have anything else. Thanks, Jason. Do you have anything else you want to say before
I'm
we
out of
wrap up?
here.
All right. Enjoy that 68 degrees. Lucky. I'm going to go walk out into 42.
Ouch.
Yeah. Hey, it's better than it has been. It's been like in the 20s, so I'll take 42. The snow's
It's
finally
been
melting.
I live pretty close to the beach. There's been nights around 45 at night.
Oh yeah, not
But
at
today's a
night we're
beautiful day.
40s. Yeah, in the night we're 40s, or I mean in the day we're in the 40s. At night we're in usually 20s or 30s, but it depends. But
So that's
we're
when you
almost
need to
there.
get battery powered underwear.
Oh God, I thought about that for a second. I was like, how's that gonna work? I think we'll leave. That's a perfect way to close up. Battery powered underwear. All right. Thank you, Jason. Again, appreciate you, man. Take care. And
All right,
everybody out
we'll
there
see
in
you guys.
YouTube, thank you guys. Everybody else, appreciate you. Have a great rest of your weekend. Cheers.
Cool.